Hey, welcome back to the Gotham and Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Vince. Hopefully you are doing well out there. I know I am. Today we're going to be talking about, what basically we're here to talk about, DC Heroes, and that's probably the best superhero role-playing game out there as far as I'm concerned. And while there are some that are probably just as good, I think DC Heroes is probably the one that takes the cake as far as things are concerned. Anyway, Gotham-database.com is my website where you can go and check out all the articles I've been putting up, as well as the back catalog of the podcast. You can find the podcast wherever you can find podcasts. Anyway, today I want to talk about a power that feels cool the second you hear the name: Dispersal. That word alone does a lot of work. It sounds strange, a little dangerous, and a little unreal, and that's exactly why I kind of like this power. This power sits in the DC Heroes 3rd Edition core rulebook. The short version is simple. You reduce your density, which makes you harder to hit, and lets attacks pass right through you. That's basically the hook for this power. That is the fantasy. And honestly, that is enough to get attention right away, and it got my attention right away when I was looking through what I should talk about today on the podcast. Because this is the kind of power that changes how the whole scene feels. A stronger punch is fun, heat vision is fun, super speed is obviously always fun, but Dispersal is different. It does not help you win a fight. It changes the terms of the fight itself. It makes the other side feel uncertain. It makes them kind of hesitate. It makes them wonder if they can touch you at all, and that's what really matters in the situation here. Now, a lot of powers in the superhero games are really direct. You're harder to hit, you move faster, you see further. This one is slippery. It makes you weird, it makes you hard to pin down, it makes you feel like a ghost, even if you're really not one, and that's why I really like this power. And that's kind of why this power I picked for the whole episode to talk about, and frankly I like to break it down like this and just talk about individual powers or something that, or if I'm just doing a module review, but this one's really worth talking. Now, if you are reading that description for the first time in the book, your mind probably goes right to phasing through walls, and yes, that is part of the appeal. It's the first thing that most of us picture when you talk about this power. Hero standing in front of a vault door, smiling and just stepping through like the metal is, not there, or smoke, or whatever, or nothing, pretty much. And that works. That is comic book stuff, and basically the same, in the way it is written. What really interests me more is what happens when you bring that power into actual play now. Because the second the character becomes harder to hit, everything really does shift for you. The thug with the crowbar is not as scary in the same way anymore for your character. Not that he was to begin with, but he's less scary. The sniper on the rooftop is not solving that problem anymore because that bullet's going to go straight through you. Even that big bruiser, the guy who usually fixes everything by smashing through it, suddenly has to stop and think how he's going to attack you. And I love powers that force people to think. This is where tabletop games actually really get good, when people start to have to think. Strategy. What am I going to do? Instead of just, I use my fist, duh. So it's easy to picture a fight where both sides just trade hits until somebody drops. Boring. We've all seen that. We've all run that. Sometimes it's fun, sure. Sometimes it's old, and I'm more towards the point of it's getting old. And yeah, okay, and it does work great at times, sure. But powers like Dispersal mess with the rhythm like that. They break the easy answer. You swing, it goes through. You fire, it goes through. You rush the target, they are not where your fist expects them to be. That puts tension in the scene, and now people at the table are starting to ask questions and start trying to think of different ways. How can I trap this person? How can I force them to solidify so I can hit them? Can I hit them with something other than brute force? Can I corner them, or is that going to be just useless? This is what I want in a superhero game. I want a power that makes the table lean forward just a little bit in their seat and go, not sit back and pick up their phone and go, yep, I attack, I got this, cool, alright, Facebook. I hate that, trust me. And there's another reason why I really like this power. Dispersal does not only work for heroes. A hero with Dispersal power obviously feels slick, smart, hard to stop, maybe even noble in a way, maybe haunted, who knows. Just maybe strange. Now, a villain with Dispersal is where it becomes a nightmare. Think about it. A normal villain kicks the door down, throws a punch, makes a threat. Fine. We know that beat. We've done that 1,000 times. We've seen it in comics 1,000 times, in TV shows, whatever, cartoons. But a villain who can let attacks pass through them, who can move with that cold confidence because bullets and fists do not mean much of anything anymore to them in a normal way, that is different. Now that will stick to your mind. That'll stick in your head. That kind of villain does not have to talk much. They just have to stand there and let the first desperate attack fail on them. That is enough. The room changes after. People at the table reconsider their actions now that they saw what happened after that first attack. You can hear it at the table. Someone laughs kind of nervously. Somebody else says, okay, wait a minute. Then the players stop thinking like players and start thinking like people in danger, because they pretty much are. And that's when it starts to become tabletop gold. And we all want gold when it comes to the table. Memorable moments. And these definitely are memorable moments here. The best part is Dispersal is not really loud. It's not showy in the usual sense. It's kind of quiet, creepy, the kind of power that turns confidence into doubt. I think this is why it lands so well in a DC Heroes game. Mostly, probably in a street level game would be a little bit more interesting. Though, I could see high level games with this type of power really making players go, And it will work really well in Gotham. Gotham is built for powers that feel unsettling, especially. A bright cosmic beam belongs somewhere else. A man or a woman who can let your attack slide right through them while keep walking towards you, that feels right at home for a Batman villain, don't you think? Right in Gotham. It feels like something you would remember after the session ends, and I definitely know I would if I was playing in that game. I also like this power that invites style. Not every character with Dispersal should feel the same. One character might look misty and kind of barely there. Another one looks like smoke under a street lamp or something. Another might flicker in and out, unstable, kind of like a little staticky thing, as if the world cannot quite hold them in place and they're just kind of phasing in and out. Another one might stay perfectly visible, perfectly calm, but just nothing connects. It goes right through them. Kind of like a hologram. Think of that. That is almost worse, honestly, if you think about it. There's something cold about a character who does not even bother to dodge. Just stands there as the punch goes through them. They're just kind of tilting their head to the side a little bit, going, okie doke. And all that comes from this one core idea. Reduce your density, harder to hit, attacks pass through. Simple on the page, rich at the table when you first do it. That is kind of the sweet spot for this thing. So when I look at Dispersal, I just do not see a defensive power. I see a mood. I see scene control. I see a power that tells you something about a person using it. Are they afraid of contact? Are they used to being untouchable? Do they rely on this power because deep down they cannot take a real hit? Or maybe they are so confident in that they have forgotten what danger feels. Well, it's hard to say, really. It's kind of good material when you think about it. It's give you something to talk about beyond mechanics, and for this show, that really matters when coming to planning this podcast. Because I do not want to just say what the power does. I want to talk about why it's fun. I want to talk why it's memorable and why it belongs in your game. I could sit here and just read from the book and, that'd be fun, I guess. I don't know. I don't think it'd be fun. Sure, I can go over it and then read it word for word, but you can also pick up the book and do the same thing yourself. I'd rather describe it and talk about it in a way like this and kind of give you little ideas to think about in your mind. So when you do read the power, you're like, now didn't that guy on that podcast at one time say something like this or that? Oh yeah, let me go back and listen to that again. Now I'm reading this power because my guy has that power, or my gal has that power. Maybe he or she is going to be using this more often now that it's talked about. And this power definitely belongs in your game. That is the fun part of this power. The fun part actually is Dispersal also creates limits. Limits where good characters live. Because the second a power makes you feel untouchable, I start wondering what happens when confidence does crack. What happens when the character gets too used to walking through danger? What happens when they stop respecting the fight? That is where this power kind of gets interesting to me as a role-playing tool. A character with Dispersal might come off as calm, collected, and almost impossible to rattle. But maybe that is only because they have built their whole life around never being to be touched, never being pinned down, never having to stand there and take a hit like every other person has to do. You can do a lot with that when it comes to a character. Maybe your hero phases through walls because closed spaces really bother him. Maybe your villain uses Dispersal because she cannot stand the idea of anyone laying a hand on her. Maybe the power is not just defense, maybe it says something ugly or sad or revealing about the person carrying it. You have to think about these things. And this is where I start paying attention to them. Because now it's not just something that's neat. Now it's character backstory material. And that matters even more in a DC game, where so many of the best heroes and villains are built around one really strong idea. Batman is not a guy with gear, he is obsession, discipline, and control. The Flash just really isn't speed, he's momentum, hope, motion, and heart. A character with Dispersal is telling you something too. Maybe they are distant, maybe they're evasive, maybe they have spent so long surviving by slipping through danger they don't even know how to face anything head on anymore. This is all good stuff. You can build a whole personality from this while you're thinking about it. And as the GM, that is the kind of power I want to see on a sheet because it gives me more to work with than just, combat numbers. If I know a character can become hard to hit and let attacks pass through them, I am already thinking about the kind of scenes that power invites. Not just fights, I'm talking scenes, a hostage situation where they can get into a room no one else can reach. A crumbling building where the normal path is blocked, but they can move where others cannot. A prison break where the cell itself needs nothing, but choices around the escape still do matter. That is really the key of this power, and the power should open the story, not replace it. And that is where a lot of people get nervous when phasing style powers, with these phasing style powers. They hear the concept and think, well, does this just solve everything? No, it specifically solves some things, but it also creates new problems. This is why I do not mind this, and I actually like this power, because I like this. Because yes, maybe you can get through the wall, fine, great, but what happens when you are on the other side alone? What happens when you avoid the punch, but not the gas-filling room? Because remember, you're untouchable doesn't mean you still don't need to breathe or anything. What happens when the problem is not being hit? It is making contact, holding someone up, carrying the wounded kid, pulling the lever, catching the person who's falling, all because you can't, because you're untouchable. That's when this power starts to become more interesting. The best superhero powers do not erase tension, they kind of reshape it. Dispersal does that absolutely. It shifts the question away from can I survive the hit and towards what kind of situation am I actually. That is a stronger design than people give credit for. And honestly, I think that is the sort of power that becomes more fun the older you get as a gamer. When you're younger, maybe you want the loud stuff, the giant blast, the huge damage, the easy visual. Nothing wrong with that. The stuff is part of the game. It's part of the genre too, so that's really what's going to... But after a while, the powers that stay with you are often the ones that you create weird decisions around. The ones that make you kind of stop for a second. The ones that make you ask at the table, wait, how with this? Dispersal is just definitely one of those powers that does that. I can already picture the scene, a hero chasing a suspect into an abandoned subway tunnel. The suspect turns, smiles, and the first attack goes right through them. No effect. No reaction, just that quiet little moment where everybody realizes this is not going to be a normal confrontation. That is good comics, that is good gaming, and that is why things work. Picture a hero with Dispersal trying to save somebody from a collapsing floor. Maybe he can let the debris pass through him, fine, but can he hold the victim? Can he brace the beam? Can he stay solid at the right moment? Suddenly that power that looked like a perfect safety becomes a timing problem. Sure, you could stay dispersed through this whole scene. That's great, but, you got to save people. You got to move things. You got to undisperse yourself. So, because now the scene is not about whether the power is cool. I mean, of course it's a cool power. Now the scene is about whether the hero can use it at the right second in the right way under pressure. And that is where the sessions really get remembered. I also think this power helps sell the idea that not every strong character has to feel strong in the same way. Some characters dominate space by force, some dominate by speed, some dominate because nobody can get a clean shot on them, nobody can hold them, nobody can quite make the world stick to them. The last one feels different. It gives the character a different kind of pressure, the power, and I like that. Because if you are building a roster, whether it's heroes or villains, variety matters. You do not want every fight to feel just some type of exchange with different costume masks on. You want the enemy who shrugs off hit. You want one enemy who shrugs off hits because they are made of steel, another one who avoids them because they are faster than thought, and then you want who lets the hit pass through because they are simply not all there in the usual sense. That makes the world feel bigger. That makes the powers feel distinct. And in superhero game, distinction matters almost as much as once. And to me, that is the real charm of Dispersal. It's not just a trick power, it's not just a defensive gimmick, it is one of those powers that quietly changes the whole tone of the character and reshapes the scene. You can use it for horror, mystery, escape, infiltration, survival, or just, that perfect comic book moment where the impossible suddenly feels normal because the character... That's why I want this DC power in my DC Heroes game. So tell me what you think when it comes to this power. Give me a little comment here. Maybe next time we'll look at another power, maybe a role, maybe something small that turns out to be a lot bigger when you really sit with it and think about it. I don't know. Till then, keep your eyes open, keep your nose closed, and if the person you are chasing smiles when your punch goes right through them, or maybe rethink your plan. Don't forget, Gotham-database.com is the website, and you can follow me on Gotham Beyond X. Visit those things, and keep it original, keep it old school. Good night and God.